it took me a long time to realize that distribution is literally 50% of the battle, right? Like, you'll know this. It's like, you write anything, however much energy you put into writing that, you're going to have to put the exact same into promoting it, because no one else is going to do it for you. And there's so much content out there. So when I finally came around to realizing that distribution's half the battle and that I can actually build my own distribution, I'm like, okay, well, I should definitely try to go solo and truly write about things that I care about and at the cadence I want.
Today we are talking with Trung Phan. He is a writer with Workweek and Bloomberg. He is the creator and co-founder of bearly.ai. He is doing a bunch of different things. He's also working on a TV series. He is a 1-year veteran of carving his own path. I'm excited to dive into his story. We've both spent considerable time abroad in Asia. I want to dive into that as well. Welcome to the podcast, Trung.
Thank you, dude. Thank you. Where's the path? I can't see it. We're without a path right now. I'm looking at this. So for the listeners here, I'm in this Riverside app and I see like the cover of Paul's book and just says the pathless path. And then when you actually break down those words, without a path, I'm like, this is the most confusing shit in the world, man. So,
people like it though. I don't know.
Okay. All right. So it's just, it's like, you know what it reminds me of? And I'm not saying this is in a positive way. Have you seen Forrest Gump? When there's like the plastic bag just floating in the wind? This is what this feels like, but in a good way. Because like, I'm all for floating in the wind as a plastic bag.
The bagless bag.
Sequel. No, dude. So I had no idea you lived in Asia. I'm hijacking this interview. Where'd you live?
Hold on. I have one scripted question I ask all my guests.
Okay.
What are the stories and scripts you grew up with around work when you were growing up? We're going to answer that, and then we can use that to talk about living in Asia, because I think that's important.
Well, it's also very related to, see, like even when I rudely cut you off, it all comes back together, because we're like that bag in Forrest Gump. It's just flying around. It's going to find its way. Asian parents, dude. Like you can guess right now. What did my parents want me to be when I grew up? Just guess.
Doctor, lawyer, academic,
engineer.
professor.
You nailed it, dude. Yeah. So I went, my older brother is a doctor. I went to university, pre-med, and then I almost failed calculus in the first semester because I was getting hammered every day and the class was at 8:00 a.m. So I'm like, I got to find a major where all the classes start at noon. And sure enough, it was history and sociology. So I cannot, I'm not exaggerating. I literally set my schedule based on the time that the classes start. And like that's how I picked my major. So I dropped out of pre-med. And that's the answer.
This is very resonant. I had this 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. lab I had in science. I forget what it was, biology or something. And it was like, there were like 4 people in it because nobody wanted something that late on a Friday. But I just like did not want to get up in the morning. So I would go straight from the lab to the bar. It was great.
That's that's a no-brainer. Like if you're going to have to go to 8 a.m. versus 5 p.m., it's like, what difference does it make? When you're in your late teens or early 20s, your circadian rhythm won't even get you. You shouldn't be waking up before 8 anyways, man.
So I went to a big public school in the States, and it was mostly oriented around partying and socializing. Do you think people are undervaluing just like screwing around and having fun in your early 20s as sort of a way for later career success?
I went so far on the other side of that we will both know people that, finished school in 3 years and we're volunteering on the side. It's like, that's not me. I also probably went a bit too far on the other side, like picking majors based on times that the classes start. But yeah, there's a happy middle ground, right? And let's be honest, you don't learn anything in college. It's like you make buddies there and you fucking have a good time. Your prefrontal cortex isn't even developed yet. Like, who cares, right? Just have a good time.
So the funny thing is, I was doing a bit of research about you and your history. I was reading my own history, Phan Boi Cho, and your great-grandfather. Have you read the Wikipedia entry?
Oh, I'm very familiar with that. I mean, I have his
So
books and like.
I want to read this, and I think you're pretty similar to him in some ways. So Phan admitted he did not understand the meaning of the text in great detail. He's talking about reading the Confucian texts at the time, but by age 6, he was skillful enough to write a variant of the Analects that parodied his classmates, which earned him a caning from his father. Now, come on, how do we not see the parallels here?
Like father, like great grandfather, like great grandson.
Do you think he would be proud of your Twitter posting?
What I will say is this. So that's a great question, and I don't want to have anybody rolling in their graves, including my ancestors. My answer would be yes, and I'll tell you why. So like his claim to fame was, I mean, he literally tried to get the French kicked out of Vietnam. Like he went to Japan and procured weapons and was involved in a plot that, well, it killed a bunch of French colonialists, right? Like if the French consider him a terrorist, but in Vietnam he's a national hero, obviously. The whole point being, he knew the power of ideas, right? And this is why he wrote. If you look at any type of textbook or history book about late 19th century Vietnam, early 20th century Vietnam, like his books and writing will be at the top of those lists, because he was giving, because Vietnam's a very proud country, and for thousands of years it's been under the influence of China, right? Like China's the massive neighbor to the north, and Vietnam, actually, I've talked about this before, but like I live in Canada and we're like America's hat. So like I understand like in my blood what it feels like to be like this smaller brother nation. And so like his whole point was like, Vietnam does have this very rich history, but it's always been encroached by other powers. And he just wrote very vocally about, Vietnam should just carve out and make very clear that these are our borders and like this is our history and our people. And the influence at the time in the late 9th century was Japan, right? Japan had woken up with the Meiji Restoration and been like, they sent officials to Germany and America as like, we need to westernize our country or we're going to get gobbled up by them. And my great-grandfather looked at Japan as a model. But the mistake he made with Japan wasn't interested in lifting up all Asian people. They're interested in becoming the hegemon in the region, which is why we had World War II, or specifically in the Pacific. But anyways, the reason why I say, to answer your question, why I think he'd be proud is he knew the power of ideas. And Twitter is, as we know, we're both on there quite a bit. The amount of politicians, media figures, influential people on Twitter, it is like the fastest way to move information and influence minds. Like even something as small as like recently we see this like generative AI war. Like where is Sundar Pichai answering back with Bing? He's literally putting out a Twitter thread, right? Like it just shows you the power of this platform. And even though we all know, we can joke about it, it's like grossly under monetized, and like whatever's happening right now under Elon is like a totally different question entirely. Like that'd be a whole episode. But yeah, I think he would be proud.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating that time period. He's like hanging out with Sun Yat-sen, who was huge in influencing. He's interesting. I spent a lot of time in Taiwan. He's the one person that both Taiwan and China, who were like see him as like a great leader.
Well, they see him as the father figure of
then they split off.
20th century. Yeah, exactly, right? Like that's such a great point. I love that we're going down this road because I'm very passionate about this stuff. I really don't get to talk about it on podcasts. But you're right, man. It's like he's a fascinating figure, Sun Yat-sen. And the fact that my great-grandfather had an opportunity to speak with, he was a Republican. He was the person that brought the Republican fervor to the literally landmass of China. And then, like you said, obviously Taiwanese look up to him and very influential.
Yeah, I did like the career thing. I was a little better in school and like trying to optimize the grades and do all that stuff, and worked in strategy consulting for 10 years, but eventually went to Taiwan when I was 33, 32, and it changed so much for me. Just living outside of the US, I wonder if that was a similar thing for you. I know it was a little weird going to Vietnam, because your parents were like, why would you go back, right? And I know that's a very common theme with immigrant parents and sort of disconnecting from their country when they left. How are you thinking about going back? What drove you to go back?
Yeah, well, I'll address your question exactly, because when people do ask me, should I live abroad at a young age, I actually say, okay, if you want to there's two ways to look at it in my eyes. If you want to just stick around for a year, teach English in Southeast Asia, cool, do that. But if you're like, in your mind, you really have no idea what you're going to do, and like you're going to go there and just try to quote unquote figure it out, you're actually better off in a mini version of what you did. Get some Western skills, because that way, and like, if you work at McKinsey for 2 years and you go to Asia, they're gonna make you like VP of operations, right? And you'll get paid way better, and you can actually. Though that's what I mean. It's like I went there without a plan. It's like I couldn't even get a job teaching English, because this was very humbling. Because it turns out nobody in Vietnam, exactly, they don't want another Vietnamese kid, right? It's like that's the entire point. You nailed it. It's like, so that was extremely humbling. Like the only job I was actually qualified to do at a university, because I had a history and sociology degree, was to teach English in Vietnam. It's like literally the only skill I had, and I couldn't even do that because they wanted a white person. I mean, this is the thing that a lot of people don't understand too about Asia. We don't have to go deep about the race questions in North America and all that, but it's like,
no, happy to.
You truly have to live abroad to understand. It's like Vietnam is 99% Vietnamese. Japan is 99% Japanese. Do you understand how retrograde the view of like the majority of these countries are to other races? It's just like this is what, to me, when I see this wokeism movement happen, is like, you guys don't understand. Like go to Southeast Asia, go to East Asia, go to South Asia. That's half the world. Look at how they treat people of different quote unquote races.
There's a lot of progress to be had.
There's a lot of progress to be had, right? So I think, to answer your question, is important. Yeah, it gives you so much perspective, because yes, of course, everybody should be treated. Everybody should be given an opportunity to succeed in this world and treated equally. But what you have to remember is like looking at North America, like Canada and USA. Yes, massive problems. But if you compare it to a lot of these other countries and regions, it's like it's night and day. Like you can't even compare. Like I have a lot of relatives in Vietnam, which just straight up, they just have never met anyone that's not Vietnamese, right? Like 100%, like rural Vietnam. They wouldn't even know how to interact. They hold every single like negative view you could think of other races, because they just literally have never met them. And I think it's I think it's probably one of the more important lessons living abroad, actually.
Yeah, my wife is Taiwanese, so I am the white person that her family hangs out with. Yeah, I'm the single person.
So everything you do, you're representative of the other billion plus like Caucasians, right?
I represent the Americans.
Yeah. 100%, man.
But yeah, it was a mind-blowing experience also. I mean, you can know other people live different ways, but until you live in the mix of different ways of living, I mean, just simple stuff like riding a scooter around Saigon, right?
Yeah.
It's crazy. It's a completely different way of orienting. It's a different energy. Walking around the streets is so different. I've only visited Vietnam for 4 days, but
okay. But you got the energy.
Yeah.
You feel there's like an energy to it.
It's wild, and there's more young people. It's like this future optimistic energy. It's a little crazy. It's and it's extremely Vietnamese. Like Taiwan is 99% Taiwanese, so they're in such a bubble of their own cultural scripts and ways of thinking about the world too. You sort of start picking up all these different ways of thinking. What was that like for you? I mean, obviously there was some cultural stuff for you, probably getting a new perspective on your own culture.
I think because prior to moving there, I'd been there with my family a couple of times, which probably isn't surprising, right? Asian parents bring their kids back. But I think the interesting thing, and I mean, this wouldn't be surprising to you, is because my family, they left before the fall of Saigon, right? So they hold very negative views about the Vietnamese Communist Party fairly. And to your initial point is like, well, not only like what do immigrant parents feel when their kids go back, but like to the country, that it's not in a positive way that they left, right? Like their memory, even though like my great grandfather's a hero in Vietnam, is like he has a very interesting history of the Communist Party. So they tried to bury his legacy for decades because he was an intellectual rival to Ho Chi Minh. So he was buried, his reputation was buried for decades. So it's not like what I want to make clear is like, is my great grandfather a very prominent and influential figure, but it's not like we come from wealth in Vietnam. Like everything was taken, and his reputation has gone through ups and downs, and that all ties back to what you've said. Is like, I think the main thing for me was going back there, and it had nothing to do with the culture. It's just like it's just about my age and the time, and what you kind of initially asked, like, should people live in Asia at that time or live abroad at their young age? The main lesson for me was like, I'm glad I did what I did, because now with obviously, with a kid and like settled down, it's like it would never happen again, right? Like that's like my frame is not really cultural. It's just like looking at the arc of my life, knowing that I would never be able to do that again. And that's what I look back at. And I met my now wife there, and that's obviously super important. But the takeaway kind of being like, I don't look at it like, oh, I had this like cultural awakening. I'm just like, I would never be able to do what I did for those 5 years ever again.
You meet a lot of interesting people too in these environments, right? These expat worlds. And I know that's injected some of your writing. Talk to me about like, who are some of the people? Like, it's wild the people you meet living in these countries as expats.
I mean, dude, you lived in Taiwan, you've been in Asia. The funny thing about the expat world is it's a small sliver, right? But they're all and you'll get the full spectrum. You'll get literally just backpacking bums. You'll get teachers, and then you'll get local CEOs of those companies. And the thing is, they all hang out at the same place, right? Yeah. There's like the expat bars, like it's a well-known trope. You probably know it. You've been. I'm sure there's many expat bars in Taiwan or Taipei, and the funny thing though I'll say about expats is this: you nailed it. There's so many different characters, and the thing that I like though is that if you're an expat in Saigon, you're 1 degree removed from like the expat community in Bangkok. Like you'll hit the ground and somebody will know somebody there. It's like, go here, hook up with this person. They're going to party. And like, no matter where I went in Asia, it's just one layer of group of people. It's like kind of going to university again, right? It's like, oh yeah, I met with Danny in Shanghai, and then I met with like Tim down in Bangkok. It's like, that feeling. So two things I'd say. Number one, we touched on is like there's the whole spectrum of interesting characters, and they are truly interesting characters because from the TV show that I'm working on, I'm still in development hell, unfortunately, but we have done some episodes. That's the positive, like produced them. There's a couple lines in there, and they're taken from actually Hemingway. So Hemingway was famously an expat in Paris. And he had a whole crew over there. Scott Fitzgerald, who wrote The Great Gatsby, a bunch of the artists. They're all just hanging on Paris, right? But then his description of expat life in Paris in the 1920s, he's basically talking about, I get drunk every day, I don't do anything, and I like have sex with random people. Like that's his story of being an expat. Like that is what a lot of expat life is like in East Asia or anywhere really, right? It's like you've been derooted from where you grew up, and I think specifically in Southeast Asia, I love your thoughts on this. The framing that we did around the TV show about expats is in Southeast Asia, if you end up as an expat in like Saigon or Cambodia or Thailand or even like the Philippines, like you're not like, you didn't go to Harvard Business School, right? You went to Harvard Business School, you'd be in Tokyo or you'd be in Hong Kong or Shanghai or Seoul. You know what I mean? Like there's tiers of cities in Asia, and like the expats I hung around, these were not the best and the brightest that were offered by the world, right? This was like people that are truly running from stuff. And there's an economic reason why that happens too. It's like, it's much cheaper to live in Cambodia and Thailand and Vietnam. It's extremely expensive to live in Seoul and Tokyo. Like you need to be a high flying executive to really live it up there. Well, not really live it up. You can still live pretty well in Hong Kong, but you know what I mean, right?
It's expensive. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's changed. So I think you were there early, and I think there's a difference between expats sponsored by their companies, right, and digital nomad entrepreneurs, people who are like long-term travelers. There's been such a dramatic increase. When did you leave Vietnam?
Yeah, I probably way before 2008, 2012. It blew up probably 5 or 6 years later.
Yeah, the last 10 years have been such an explosion of people like me, like digital nomads. I didn't drink when I was in Asia for 3 years, which probably, that probably seems crazy to you. I also didn't, I hung out with like other digital nomads and a lot of locals because I met my wife so early after moving there. So it was a bit of a different experience, but I think it's evolved. And these countries have gotten a lot richer in the last 10 years.
Yes.
So there's a lot of local stuff that's happening where a lot of locals are intertwined with the entrepreneurial digital nomad co-working ecosystems. I think you'd be surprised going back. Like I went to Saigon in 2019.
Okay,
and
that's recent.
It was such an interesting mix of like locals, entrepreneurs, digital nomads, and I think it's evolved. But I definitely get what you mean. But yeah, it's just so much easier to meet people now. Like smartphones changed everything.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, when I went to Vietnam in 2008, it was like barely anyone was on Facebook in Vietnam, right? Totally game changed now. But to your point, I think exactly. My description of what I just said is a very time capsule of that time. So I will caveat for 2008, 2010 region. And I think your framing is correct. Though. Like it's pre-Instagram, like it's way pre-TikTok, obviously. And smartphone hadn't really penetrated the country yet. Like iPhone had only been out a year by the time I'd been there. So it was interesting, man. It was again, I'll go back to my initial thought. It's like I'm just happy I did it for that time period because I could not do it again. But it's amazing you did it in your early 30s, man. Like that's cool.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a different perspective. I think I had more stuff to reflect on. It was like a slower, more contemplative reflection. And yeah, I was kind of lost in my life and trying to be found, which is a classic script in Asia.
Yeah. Contemplative. Great word, by the way. Haven't heard that one in a while.
Check this out. Vietnam, 2010 GDP, or 2009 GDP was 106 billion. Today it's 366 billion. That's wild.
Still 1/7 of Apple. No, like literally, like that's how I look about how I remember. Like
this is like a tweet thread. It's like lesson: Vietnam should have bought Apple.
Yeah,
or like Apple
should have bought Apple
Vietnam.
early. I'm stealing that.
That's awesome. So in Vietnam, though, you wrote for this paper. That's sort of like an accidental thing. You had no other options, but.
Exactly.
When did you realize like writing was a thing either you liked or could be?
I've always.
Yeah.
Great question. I've always liked writing. I actually went quote unquote viral, or like I wrote a pretty popular blog on my Guild.
Trunk Stunner.
Yeah, Trunk Stunner about partying. And like it was weird as my first taste.
I couldn't find it. I searched the web.
Oh, I deleted it. That stuff is like. I was like, you know what? This should not last. This should not be lasting. This is not meant to be archived on the internet. There's nothing super wrong with it. It was just like really immature, just partying jokes. Like, I wouldn't mind looking at it now, but like, I'm sure in 2010 when I wasn't able to get a job, or 2009, I'm like, you know what? Maybe it's time to pull the plug on this thing. But looking back, I probably should have just pursued that from the beginning. The writing, because as you know, with your kind of ventures and media ventures, man, the number one thing for audience building is time. There's only so many new subscribers you can get a week, right? So many new followers you can get every week. It's like the reality is that it's just time. It's like the Morgan Housel quote about Warren Buffett in The Psychology of Money, one of the greatest books ever. He says Warren Buffett's like his skill's investing, but his secret is time, right? Like that's just it. It's just. You have to let time happen. That's what I regret the most, actually, is like if anybody ever asked me about, building in public, media stuff, I'm like, I just wish I'd started earlier. Again, it's not for everyone. Like you have to want to go through the ups and downs for a decade plus because the fruits of all that labor is going to wait at the end, right? It's like, nothing happens in the first. You know this. You're a book publisher. You run a podcast. It's like nothing, everything is at the end is where the payoff is. And you just have to be willing to wait that long. But yeah, I've known because I wrote this blog in university. It was a fraction of the kind of distribution I get now on Twitter. But like, it was cool, right? You're walking around campus like, yo, Trung, funny blog. And I'm like, oh, amazing dopamine. Like, you know what I mean?
The original likes.
Yeah, the original likes was somebody just pointing at you on campus. I'm like, yeah, buddy. Thanks, buddy. But yeah, I knew. And that was like, when I said that teaching English is my only skill, that's not actually true. Writing was my other skill. Like, I'd say I've always been a pretty natural writer. And when I say that, it's because natural in the sense, you know how they always say, write in your own voice? like that's what I've actually been doing, like from the very beginning. I write my own
You're great
voice.
at that.
Yeah, it's just like I literally never did not do that. So I guess I never had like apprehension about it. So that's a lot for a lot of people. The problem with writing your own voice, like you're like, oh, what if my voice is stupid, right? It's like that. I never had that for some reason, and so yeah, been able to write pretty early. I can write. I mean, I can write like very like dry stuff too, right? So which is what I had to do as an equity analyst. Ultimately, where I ended up in Vietnam. And then, listen, you're a consultant. You know what it feels like to write that freaking that soul sucking like industry analysis overview. The drivers, what are the key risks? Yeah. So
yeah, I can pump out a 25-page in-depth research report on the economics of I don't even know.
Coffee. Let's call it rubber and coffee.
I can do that. Yeah, coffee. Let's break it down. We'll do the segments, the different regions.
I did rubber and coffee while I was in Vietnam. That was funny. I know a lot more about rubber than I should.
But yeah, that stuff's super helpful. I think you probably learned, I think from consulting, what I learned is like, I feel kind of bad saying this, but I didn't really find writing a book very hard because I'm very good at structuring lots of ideas. It's just a time thing. I just need to like go through the motions. But yeah, for me, a long time, I didn't think of myself as a writer either. But I look back now and I'm like, oh, you moron. You liked writing all these times. I just never thought of it as like a thing people do.
Well, I mean, fair. It's also not easy to make a living.
It wasn't for a long time.
Yeah.
Like our paths right now were literally not possible 5 years ago when I quit my job.
Well, that's why everybody looks up to Ben Thompson, right? Like he lives in Taiwan. He's like, you know him.
He's the OG.
Yeah, he's the OG.
I don't know him. I used to just say I was the second most important newsletter writer in Taiwan.
A white newsletter writer in Taiwan. Nice. I love that.
Yeah. What, how did you end up at The Hustle?
So when I left Vietnam, I did an MBA. So this is for I guess a lot of your listeners are kind of career like ideas. Is like when I left Vietnam, I didn't have any, again, other than writing and my experience there, which is not super valuable in North America. Vietnam, as you alluded to, is quite a small market. I went back and did an MBA as a 1-year MBA as a way to integrate myself in North America's economy. I probably shouldn't have done that because it ended up costing, including opportunity cost, maybe 150. 200K, and looking back,
brutal.
Unnecessary. But yeah, that was fortunately, I was able to get a job in the States because Vancouver, notoriously for its cost of living and its housing, pays awful, like for the average job. There's not a ton of industry here. Or there wasn't when I graduated. Even now, there's not a ton. I mean, it's primarily mining and real estate. There's a lot of tech here, but it's more engineer-driven, and they're just kind of stashing people. Like Seattle, I mean, Amazon just stashes people up here that can't get visas, right, to Seattle. And I wasn't an engineer, but I ended up working, same skill as research, writing. I ended up working for Kensho, which is a fintech company in Boston. And that was nice because I got into the U.S. market. And the way I actually met, got hooked up with The Hustle was one of my colleagues from Kensho was an early investor in The Hustle. And he knew I had liked writing like in my own voice comedically and obviously had this kind of finance business background. And he's like, yeah, you should just write with these guys. So that's how I got linked up with The Hustle. And The Hustle, obviously, when I was working there, the move, once you start doing that, you just start to get on Twitter and being much more public. And I actually knew pretty quickly with Twitter that it was a game I could crack because in terms of humor, like I don't know if any of my listeners follow me or if they don't, I like to do memes and really dumb jokes. And that's going back to like the college thing, my blog was literally about partying and making jokes. It's like, it's always been like my North Star. And so I was watching Twitter. I'm like, oh, I saw who the big accounts were. I'm like, oh, I can do this. Like, this is doable.
That's awesome. This is another parallel I found with a Fun Boy show. He passed his regional exams in 1900. However, he had no intention of pursuing such a career and only wanted the qualification to increase his gravitas. Gonna keep living out those. Well, I hope you're not.
I got
on
the
house
CFA,
arrest
bro.
for the-
Like, I also got the CFA. Well, yeah, that's it, dude. First of all, amazing research, Paul. And yes, let's go up to there, and then let's just stop with the whole house arrest part.
Yeah.
Where, well, not only that, I mean,
the early rebel phase. We'll keep that going.
Well, we can finish it off for the listeners. Don't end up seeing the Wikipedia page, but my great grandfather. We'll close this loop on his story. Was he was sold out by Ho Chi Minh, as we alluded to, that they're intellectual rivals. He was living in Shanghai, meeting with Sun Yat-sen, and Ho Chi Minh sold him out to the French to eliminate a rival. And the French wanted to execute my great grandfather, but they realized that it would have created a martyr, so they just put him in house arrest for the last 15 years of his life. And he died at the beginning of World War II. Sorry.
Key lesson is become so valuable that they can't get rid of you.
Yeah, if you are a martyr, that protects you. That is a good lesson.
Writing every day. So I interviewed Steph Smith yesterday.
She's awesome.
And she's amazing. But she is like, she's incredible. Produces so much. She's like, I don't know how Trung did it every day. Just like day after day.
Thanks, Steph. I appreciate you.
Day after day, just like executing, shipping, and putting out amazing newsletters. What was that like? Because that seems like it kind of battle tested you. And
so that year is, I'll tell you, look, when people do ask me, it was just like a confluence of events. Some people left, COVID happened, and it became difficult for a little while to hire enough people. And I just recently moved over from Trends, which is the Hustle's kind of research group, into the daily newsletter, which is the one that I'm sure a lot of the listeners here read, which is I think the list is up to 2 million now. I was writing at the time to about 1.2 to 1.5 million readers. And yeah, the thing about daily newsletters, and I tell people this, whenever they ask me to start, like, oh, hey, should I start a newsletter? I'm like, just be sure whatever time commitment you choose, like just know, like just add an extra day. If you're doing 3 days a week, that's really a 4 to 5 day job. If you do 5 days a week, that's a full on 7 day job, because you never stop thinking about it. And what happened that year was just a confluence of events. We just were unfortunate. We had some writers leave, and then COVID happened, where I just had so much time on my hand. So it was literally a blur for about, I think, 9 months, almost close to a year. We have editors, copy editors. We had a team to structure everything, but it's like the actual writing, their days, they're almost close to a year, where it's like every single day was writing this entire email. And to be honest, I almost quite burnt out by the end, which is the end being when we were ultimately acquired by the Hustle, immediately able to hire, right? And again, I had a lot of great editors, but they also had other jobs to do too. We were just a bit short-staffed. So it wasn't like they could just chip in and write, because they had other responsibilities, right?
Yeah. So you were all acquired by HubSpot. You eventually decided to leave. What was the thought process of going on your own? And had you thought about going on your own, or did the acquisition sort of speed up something like that?
Going solo, definitely always have. I mean, there are portions of my life, like I consider my early 20s kind of going on my own, as in like I really wasn't working for anyone. I just kind of exploring my interests. And during that time we didn't talk about was I did sell a film script to Fox. Like that was what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a comedic film writer, and I thought that was my in. But anyone that knows anything about Hollywood knows this shit is so difficult to break into. Like I have very few ins. I was fortunate enough that one of my co-writers also was quite established in Hollywood, Vietnamese American, a guy named Vincent, great dude. But yeah, I always knew that, because writing, as you know, is quite an individualistic exercise, right? And all the things that you mentioned, there's so much tooling now, and that really, the thing that really made me realize that I should just go fully solo was like building my own distribution. I'm like, okay, listen, if I can grow on Twitter, and like, I know distribution's half the battle for anything. It's like, it took me a long time to realize that distribution is literally 50% of the battle, right? Like, you'll know this. It's like, you write anything, however much energy you put into writing that, you're going to have to put the exact same into promoting it, because no one else is going to do it for you. And there's so much content out there. So when I finally came around to realizing that distribution's half the battle and that I can actually build my own distribution, I'm like, okay, well, I should definitely try to go solo and truly write about things that I care about and at the cadence I want. I think that's the benefit. Like, I'm not writing 5 days a week anymore, 6 days a week. I'm not writing research reports about topics I literally actually don't care about, right? Like, it's like you said about your 25-page reports. You can do them, you just don't give a shit, right? So,
God, even if I got paid $100,000, I don't think I could muster up the energy.
You know what I mean? So, yeah, I think that's when. I mean, it's not going to be shocking to anyone that's listening that's thinking about it. It's like, if you build your own distribution, like it's in your hands, right? Is the trade-off you'd make with any larger publisher is like, oh, we can get you in front of eyeballs. That trade-off doesn't matter anymore. Or you just have all the leverage now, right? So, that's how I think about it, or thought about it.
Yeah, so the mix of activities you're doing is really interesting. I mean, you're doing your newsletter, and I think you have some distribution help with Workweek. You're also writing for Bloomberg. You're working on an AI app. You're doing the TV show script, and you're also doing the NIA pod, which is super fun to listen to.
Oh, nice, man. Yeah, I love those guys, Jack and Bilal.
How do you think about the balance of all this?
Well, we talked about the hustle 5 days a week. I kind of got myself in a position again where I kind of recreated all these obligations.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So, for example, like on Bloomberg, I'm actually taking a bit of a break right now because I just had to clear something off when I did the bearly.ai, the app. And so the good thing about the app is I knew that, so you're dealing with advertisers through your existing newsletters or podcasts, is that I had advertisers that I didn't even use the product for. And I'm like, I'm not crazy about that. I'm not saying that necessarily that product's bad or good. I just truly don't know, right? And I just kind of wanted to be able to, we'll say it, I just wanted to shill something that is very consistent with me. It's like, and like I can just make, like if you look at like my Twitter and how I shill Barely, which is like for the listeners, it's an AI powered research app. Is like it's everything that you kind of seen, but all in one place. Like it has reading tools, writing tools, image generation, text to image. I guess the positioning wise, if we have to get McKinsey about it, is like if people ask you, so okay, why don't I just use like Bing or OpenAI or ChatGPT? Is like this is pure simplicity for us. Is like we're integrating it onto one place and we're making a lot of custom prompts, and so we think it's a UX differentiation. Because I think at the end of the day, all these large language models are going to be commoditized and everybody's going to have access to them. So it really becomes a question of distribution and user interface for consumer facing products anyways. But yeah, so I say all that as a preamble to, if you search my name on Twitter and you punch in BEARLY, barely, you'll just see how dumb my shills are. It's just purely just joke after joke after joke about like, hey, is this a good SaaS business? And it's like an arrow pointing all the way down, right? It's like, hey, I made $0 last month. How do I multiply the MRR on that for the entire year, right? It's just jokes that you couldn't do if you're advertising another product, but it's just so consistent and consistent with my existing content and personality that people fucking love it. Like they just engage with it, right? And honestly, it's just like I'm having a good time. Like, I want to make money with Barely. Like, and it's not going to take a lot. Like I need 5,000 paying customers for a 7-figure business. But like the whole point is I'm actually trying to have fun, right? Like I'm actually trying to have a good time and deliver value for people. And if you enjoy that Venn diagram, amazing. And so like to summarize, to answer your question is like, how do I look at it all? So I had to drop something to do this new thing. But the new thing, which is this AI app startup, is like very consistent with what I'm already doing. So I'm just trying to like, you only have so much time every week, right? And especially with a kid, you're just like, the hours I can dedicate is quite restricted right now. So if I can find a way just to shoehorn something into stuff I'm already doing, making jokes on Twitter, beautiful.
Yeah, I think for me, it's kind of like steering a cruise ship. You're like constantly tweaking the direction and you're like trying to get closer and closer. It's also really weird too, because once you're working on your own, you can literally do anything. You can launch a company, you can launch a newsletter, you can write for Bloomberg, right? And it's a bit overwhelming at first because you realize you can literally do anything, and like constantly tweaking and trying stuff is a challenge. We got some kid noise in the background.
Yeah,
I am
no, all
fully
good.
endorsing this. I have a daughter coming in 2 weeks. This episode will probably
incredible,
be live
dude.
when
This
I
will
have
be
a
the last
daughter.
one. This will be the last one before your daughter comes.
Last recording, yeah.
Oh, amazing, dude! Congratulations, man.
Thank you. But we are embracing children on this podcast.
Yeah, dude. Okay. Well, I mean, for the listeners, he didn't see, but I had to hit mute. My kid just literally came down and said he has to do number 2, so you might hear him say, "Daddy, I'm done." But no. Well, you had a great tweet, Paul.
Maybe that ties in. Yeah, maybe that ties in. Go ahead.
No, I just want to say you had a great tweet about, and I fully agree with you. You said, I can't remember what, I might have seen it in timeline. Maybe I'm dreaming, but you said basically, the great thing about working for yourself is you take vacation whenever you want. And it's like, oh, do you want to take a vacation? Take a weekend vacation.
Yeah.
That was you, right?
Yeah, it was. I took a vacation last week. We decided on Monday
it was
to go
definitely
away
you.
on
Yeah.
Wednesday.
Yeah. Here's the best part. You get to take midweek vacations. You're off schedule vacations.
Yes.
It's incredible.
Yeah. And I think it's funny how many people don't realize the degrees of freedom they have. Have you been able to lean into that, or have you been just because it's your first year trying to go a little harder on the work stuff?
Well, actually, what I'll say is like I've always been remote, so like I was able to walk into a situation I always wanted, as in even
That's awesome.
at my fintech startup. And sorry, dude, I'll answer that question. I gotta wipe his ass. You might want to mute that. I'll be right back.
I love this. We're keeping it in.
All right, hold on a second. I'll be right back. Oh,
That was the best answer to a question I've ever had, because I was asking how you lean into not working, and I love this because you're still on mute.
yeah, you can't do that if you're in the office, right?
That's awesome. Yeah, and is that,
No, sorry,
was that a driver?
I just want to answer. Yeah,
go ahead.
the part that I got cut off was when I cut myself off. Apologies. Was I was working remotely basically from 2015, even with the fintech startup I was at. So I've always had actually quite a few degrees of freedom, and I knew that's what I wanted to keep doing moving forward. So like it's been when COVID happened and the whole world came to like the world that I already started living in. I'm like, oh, like I was kind of waiting for that because I wanted to move back to Canada, which I did. I live in Vancouver now, but I still wanted access to the U.S. market. So like, listen, COVID, awful. But for the situation that I was in is like, that had just kind of brought a lot of people into the world that I was already living in.
Yeah, I was working remotely in a co-living house in the Canaries when the pandemic started.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, I didn't really have to make any adjustments to my life, so it was a little weird. But yeah, it's been amazing that more people can structure their lives like this. How have kids played a role in how you think about work now?
I mean, I fully get the value of remote work. Although it's very interesting, right? Because a lot of people actually don't like working at home and doing childcare because they don't think they can accomplish anything. So like, I have friends that are like, they hate it. They hate remote work. Whereas for me, I'm like, oh, it's a lifesaver with my kid. I get to spend so much time with them. But actually, for a lot of people, they're like, no, well, your job might be different. Like I can write at midnight, right? If I wanted to.
Yeah,
a lot of people, they got to be on the cadence of 9 to 5, how the corporate world's working. So I get why for them they'd be like, yeah, working at home with your kid is awful, right? You know what I mean? But like I'll do those days. I'll just play with my kid like the entire morning and then the afternoon, and not even work until after 7 p.m. So fortunate in that regard.
I love that. Yeah, and do you try to have a structured work day?
I'm thinking about it more because my kid's going to go full-time school soon. So right now, he's only doing half day. I know when he's full-time, it's like, okay, like I can actually start. In my mind, I'm like, I can accomplish a lot of things, but the reality is like, you feel however many hours you give yourself is what you're going to, like in my mind, I'm like, oh my God, next year I'm going to be an animal. But then, but the reality is like, it's probably going to be not quite animal level, but it'll be probably a little bit more than what I'm doing now. So I will try to structure a bit more next year.
Yeah. Do we have a book in your future?
I don't I mean, dude, you got a book. I don't think I'd want to sit down and deal with like if it did be self-publishing because
I guess your form of the book is self-publishing is easier than people think. So I'm happy to talk to you about that. But I guess your form of the book is like the TV script and stuff. That's like the long form like stuff that this is a great point to bring up about creating content is. Listen, it's easy to get the quick dopamine hits with the memes and the dumb tweets, but you still want to leave something for posterity, right? You wanna put your effort into something that'll take a couple of years, like you did with your book. And I mean, the TV show is one of those things. I have some other long form stuff I'm working on, but yeah, I don't think a book is necessarily in my future. I don't think it's the highest leverage thing I can do. Yeah, it's the longer projects though, like the TV script, the movie script you've done. I found, at least writing a book, there's just like the intrinsic value of that process was so rewarding, like so much better than the weekly newsletter I do. Do you get that same joy from writing comedy humor?
I do. I'll say with my newsletter, what I'm trying to do now is like, I'm trying to go, it hasn't happened yet, but I'm trying to do where like every other week is like just a true banger. Whereas maybe the ones between is like you do less, you hold yourself to less of a time bar, so you can actually put the effort into the ones that. I mean, you know how this game works, right? It's super pointy. Yeah. It's like the power law. You want ones to really hit and break through, and no one can do every single week. I mean, Matt Levine can from Bloomberg because he's a freaking alien.
He's an animal.
Yeah.
I don't want to read people like Matt Levine or Morgan Housel. I'm just like, what? How are they so good? I mean, yeah, Morgan's amazing too. Because every time you leave one of his essays, you're like, oh, this was like a punch in the face of insights, right? But Levine is just like Levine's so good that any single one of his pieces would be the best ones I've ever written. He's doing it so often, it's almost diluting how good he is. You know what I mean? Yeah, I like that idea. If he released like one every 6 months, everyone would read it. Like there'd be like a news event.
Exactly.
What's next for you and how you're thinking about the path? You're entering year 2. Are you finding you're like getting your footing a little more and starting to see longer term visions or anything like that?
Well, I'm gonna say something pretty corny, but when I ever do get asked this, it's just
we love the corny.
If you go down the path, listen, I mean, you know the Jack Butcher image, right? This is pointless.
Yeah,
it's just one of the greatest graphics ever. You should put it up. But I know that these are long-term games, and so when you ask me what my plan is like there is no plan. It's like I know what I'm doing tomorrow. I know I'm gonna send some tweets. I know I'm gonna hack away at an article for the end of the week, and I know I'll have my podcast on Tuesday. That's it. Those things are just gonna compound. I'm trusting time to do its work, and obviously opportunities come, and they do come, right? As you well know, it's like you just start getting hit up with opportunities left, right, and center as you go on this journey. So there's no master plan. I just know opportunities are going to come. If one of them just changes everything, amazing. If not, I know the path that I'm on right now is going to compound to something amazing anyways.
I love that. Yeah. Finding work you like doing and can do over long term is such a superpower in today's world. And funny enough, go ahead. No, I was going to say, do you know David Senra from the Founders podcast? Yeah, he was on this podcast a few times ago. Yeah.
So you know David's whole thing, right? David is he's literally living this thing, and every time I message him every now and then, like with new ideas I have, and he literally just goes, "Will you be doing this for 10 years?" And I'm like, "No." I was like, "Okay, that's all I need to hear." Right? That's all.
Yeah.
He's like,
he's so good at the long game.
Yeah. No, it's beautiful, dude. It's beautiful. So like. That's the best framing. Is like, I'll just steal David's quote. It's like, will you do this for 10 years? If not, you should probably reconsider it. Because all the gains we talked about is going to be at the end.
Yeah, my podcast listenership just went 5x in the last 3 months, and I've been doing it for 5 years.
Do you know what to attribute it to?
The long game.
Yeah, I think compounding,
it all compounds. Like I've got more attention from the book and more followers, people finding it. I'm getting better at interviewing people, better guests. But yeah, it's all just staying in the game.
Dude, I love it, man. I love it.
Since you're going to stay in the game and people are going to be listening to this years from now, the Pathless
Evergreen
Path podcast. Where can people find you and learn more?
Twitter is the easiest, at Trung T Phan. You can see my newsletter there if you want to subscribe. And really funny tweets shilling bearly.ai. That's a pun intended. BEARLY.ai. But yeah, the Trung T Phan has everything.
I love it. Rooting for you, man. Keep going, and excited to see what you continue to create.
I appreciate you, man. We'll do another one in a couple of years when all the compounding has picked up for both of us.
Yeah, we'll be sharing kid lessons as well.
Thanks, dude. Really appreciate the time.
All right. See you, man. Hey there. Thanks for watching that episode of the Pathless Path podcast in video form on YouTube. If you want to see more episodes, you can find links to further episodes up here, or you can subscribe over here. Thank you for your support, and I wish you luck on your own pathless path.